Dr. Sada and classmates of History 512, American Revolution. My discussion board on Thomas Jefferson. The legacy of Thomas Jefferson can be stated in this quote he did: "Timid men prefer the calm of despotism to the tempestuous sea of liberty." What kind of man was Thomas Jefferson? He held Americans to be vastly superior to Europeans, both morally and socially speaking. He continued to speak of Virginia as "my country," even when he represented the United States abroad in his cabinet position. The Declaration of Independence was for him a sacred document, part of the civil religion of liberty, and he perceived the Constitution of the United States to be a political document. It remained acceptable as long as the federal government respected what Virginians regard as the limits of authority. Federal institutions, including the presidency, were worldly things, not invested with the spiritual aura of the civil religion. Jefferson never liked to talk or mention the fact that he had twice been President of the United States as among the significant events of his career. He did mention the foundation of the University of Virginia as his pride and joy. Under President John Adams, Jefferson perceived that Virginia appeared to be threatened by an excess of federal government at one time, and he encouraged Virginians to resist. Jefferson, by this time, was becoming deeply unpopular with the more ardent defenders of the Southern institutions. The abolitionist press had been making copious use of Jefferson's anti-slavery writings, mainly from the notes of the state of Virginia, which he wrote. He was a consistent opponent of slavery, calling it a moral depravity and a hideous blot on the colonies. He believed that slavery presented the greatest threat to the survival of the new American nation. Jefferson was actively involved in legislation that he hoped would result in slavery's abolition. In 1777, Thomas Jefferson drafted a bill for establishing religious freedom. In 1778, he also drafted a Virginia law that prohibited the importation of enslaved Africans. In 1784, he proposed an ordinance that would ban slavery in the Northwest Territories. Though I feel he had major flaws in his character, believing that African Americans were racially inferior and as incapable as children. By the late 18th century, the Virginia slave owners, who were Jefferson's contemporaries, hadn't taken this Jeffersonian anti-slavery seriously. They knew Jefferson personally and knew he was not a troublemaker or an upstart in regard to his comments from his notes of the state of Virginia. There had been rumors of a consensual relationship between Jefferson and one of his slaves, Sally Hemings. This was brought to light by Jefferson's Federalist opponents in an attempt to lower his stature. Jefferson never publicly or privately commented on it to these allegations. It was never determined one way or another. He demonstrated at times and was viewed as immortal. His legacy has one constant, and that was power and control. He could be domineering and intolerable, but with the right sense of duty in his vision of a spiritually and geographically expanding nation. The examples such as the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark expeditions to the Northwest were part of this new nation in the early 19th century and a part of his vision. He was recognized chiefly for the Revolution in 1776. The virtues of this, there was no doubt. Jefferson's finished work was the creation of an imperfect but lasting democratic habit of mind and heart. Mr. Jefferson meant that the American system should be a democracy and would rather have let the whole world perish that this principle, which to him represented all that man was worth, should fail. In summary, I saw him as the political and spiritual type General George Patton of his time. He was tough, fierce, and uncompromising at times, yet his ability to compromise and improvise made him a transformational leader. "The boisterous sea of liberty is never without waves," he said. He believed in the power of words in public life, in the molding of popular opinion, and in the centrality of presidential power to keep the nation safe and strong in its most difficult times. Is it arrogance or self-confidence that Jefferson asked for three things to be put on his tombstone when the time came? Author of the Declaration of Independence, author of the Virginia Statute for Religious Liberty, and as the founder of the University of Virginia. Regardless of whether it was arrogance or being humble, Jefferson's legacy proved to me he was ahead of his time in his vision of the greatness that the new Republic of the United States of America could be. Thank you for listening in, and I hope you enjoyed this discussion.